Doom afternoon, everybody, and welcome to DNN, the Doomers News Network, where we don't cheerlead for the financial system. We just call it how we see it because somebody has to. As always, I'm joined by my good friends Travis and Melody are here with us today, and we have a fantastic show for you that Travis is going to tell you all about now.
Well, I appreciate you, Jack. And sorry that we're late, guys. I spilled some energy drink on my shirt, huh, Jack? But some great stories. Jack is going to start with This Week in June. This Week in June. Yeah, so he's going to do This Week in June. I'm sorry. This Week in June, we'll start there. Melody's going to do a really awesome story on where to get data, the data manipulation that's going on. The third story I will do on recession. We're going to ask whether or not we're in recession. And then Melody's going to do a story on China. She's going to give us an update. Is the U.S., I'm just wondering, I'm asking this, Melody, is the U.S. bailing out China? Or are they putting restrictions on them? I'm not 100% sure. Melody is going to tell us what's going on there. We're going to end with a story I'm covering on the Boeing strikes. That's right, you guys. There is a 30,000 people that walked off their job. And before I give it up to Jack, I just wanted to give a special shout out to the community. I've been extremely motivated. I've been reading the stories in the comment section. I've been reading the emails, and you guys, I just wanted to say congratulations and big props, big respect for conquering challenges, getting to the truth. Shout out to Kenny. He was on our channel the other day. Shout out to Kenny, Sean, Ulysses. We see you. Raymond, I saw you did your own YouTube channel. Props, brother. Johnny quit his job, started his own company. Trey just bought a house. Oh my God, I'm worried about him, but he's thriving. He walked into $60,000, $70,000 in equity. So they're thriving. And so I just want to encourage anyone that has a dream out there, anyone that is following their dream and is getting told no, or is getting told that you can't do something, keep going, guys. Keep fighting for your dream and use those things to help you grow. So I wanted to say I apologize for that, Jack, but I'm feeling motivated by the community. Melody, how are you?
Lovely. How are you, Travis?
I'm doing good. I'm just, I'm happy to be here. Sorry for rambling. Really excited to start this. Jack, whenever you're ready, brother.
All right, guys. Travis, if we could share my screen, I'd sure appreciate that because it's time for This Week in Doom. And it was a kind of doomy week. We've had doomier ones, but there was plenty of doom to go around this weekend. Let's start with some inflationary doom, shall we? On Wednesday morning, we got the Consumer Price Index, and that came in at 2.5% year over year, slightly below expectations for 2.6% year over year, and down sharply from the 2.9% that we got last month. And that was cause for celebration were it not for this little detail. Core inflation month over month, that one came in at 0.3%, higher than the 0.2%, and up sharply from the 0.1, up from the 0.2% last month. That one was not up sharply. But that was the big jump there in inflation, guys. It was that core number month over month coming in higher. It really took some of the wind out of the sails of that lower than expected year over year number. Core inflation takes out food and energy. And so it's left with what really durable consumer prices are doing, what services are doing. So all the decline in inflation was basically just due to lower oil prices. And of course, lower oil prices are being caused by reduction in demand and global recession worries in places like Europe, the US, and China. Then a day later, we got Producer Price Index, which is basically inflation further upstream in the supply chain. And we got a similar story. PPI year over year, if I get the right chart up. No, I didn't have the right chart up. I am remiss. Well, we're looking at the core one right now, but the year over year number came in at 1.7%. That is below the 1.8% that was expected and down sharply from 2.1% last month. So we had, once again, a big reduction in the headline number, and that was cause for celebration, but it was also dampened by core inflation on a month-over-month basis. We saw the same thing in PPI. Core inflation came in at 0.3% for the Producer Price Index, higher than the 0.2% that was expected, and up sharply from the negative 0.2% that we saw last month. So the inflation data that we got this week, it was a mixed bag. The year-over-year numbers looked great, but those core month-over-month numbers kind of took away the thunder from that lower inflation print. And so the table was set pretty much front and center, crystal clear for a 25 basis point rate cut from the Federal Reserve when they get together next week at the September FOMC. That was right up until Thursday morning when we got this article from Nick Timiraos at the Wall Street Journal. Now, if you're not familiar with this, Nick Timiraos is considered by a lot of people to be the Fed whisperer. Some people think that he is the Fed's preferred method of leaking information. If the Fed sees the market doing something it doesn't like, it will usually call up Nick Timiraos and give them some story to go print to bring the market in line. That's given him the nickname Nicky Leaks, which is kind of hilarious. And well, Nicky Leaks came out with this article that said the Fed's rate cut dilemma, start big or small, that the Fed will cut rates at its meeting next week is all but settled, but how much is shaping up to be a close call? And this article reset expectations for rate cuts. After the inflation data that we just went through, the market was virtually guaranteeing a 25 basis point cut. And the odds of a 50 basis point cut were down around 13 to 15%. Well, in the aftermath of this article from Nicky Leaks, we got now an even split 50-50, according to interest rate futures, of either a 25 or a 50 basis point cut. So the Federal Reserve, talking to Nick Timiraos, says, hey, we're not sure it's so cut and dry about 25. Nick T comes out with this article, and now it's an even split. And so the market is kind of licking its chops about that 50 basis point rate cut. Now, shifting gears a little bit, we got some rather alarming data from Ally Financial, formerly known as GMAC, who's one of the biggest lenders in the auto space. Ally's CEO was presenting at an investment conference in New York when he made some comments about July and August delinquencies. In particular, they were 20 basis points higher than Ally Financial had expected. And also net charge-offs, which basically is Ally saying no, they're not going to pay us back. Those were up by 10 basis points higher than expectations also. And the CEO made some comments about borrowers struggling with cost of living and rising unemployment. And he also hinted that these numbers were probably going to get worse before they get better. That caused Ally Financial stock to sell off almost 20% on Tuesday. And of course, people not paying their car bills, not a very good sign about the health of the consumer. Maybe that's something that'll come up in our discussion about whether or not we're in a recession. Also, speaking of are we in a recession or aren't we, we got Big Lots filed for bankruptcy this week. That is another big one. Big Lots filed Chapter 11, and they plan to close an additional 250 stores. That's on top of the 300 previously announced closures. So we're looking at 550 Big Lots stores are going to shut down. The company only operates 1,389 stores in total. So a big reduction here. That's certainly not going to help the commercial real estate situation. All of the business and assets will be sold to a private equity firm called Nexus Capital Management. And not to be outdone, we also got BurgerFi filed for bankruptcy this week. This is a restaurant chain that went public as part of a SPAC in 2020. Now, citing a drastic decline in post-pandemic consumer spending amid sustained inflation and increasing food and labor costs. That's a quote from Jeremy Rosenthal, the chief restructuring officer at BurgerFi. BurgerFi runs 144 stores nationwide. And this week, we also got the much anticipated unveiling of the iPhone 16, and the market largely yawned at it. The iPhone 16 is yet another in a long line of somewhat lacking in innovation products being put out by Apple. Now, there was a lot of talk about the iPhone super cycle and how people are overdue to upgrade their phones, and will they or won't they, considering the consumer is struggling. But Apple Intelligence was going to be the big AI feature that was going to drive people to buy this phone. The thing is, Apple Intelligence isn't ready. It's not going to be included with the phone when it's first put up for sale. And so I guess Apple is going to push out updates that will enable some of these AI features. So Apple's iPhone 16, the AI phone, will not be able to do AI, at least not right away. But the new emojis are supposedly really cool. So there's that. Also going on, something our buddy Travis is going to be talking about in great detail. Workers at the Machinist Union in Seattle have announced that they are going on strike over at Boeing. 33,000 workers on the West Coast have announced they're going on strike. That has shut down production of the Boeing's key 737 MAX plane. Boeing had offered a 25% wage increase to those employees, and that was overwhelmingly rejected by a 94% majority. And last but not least, this is a particularly doomy story. What we have shown here is an ATACMS missile. This is made by the United States. This is a long-range missile. It's being fired by a HIMARS, which stands for High Mobility Artillery Rocket System. These are systems that have been given to Ukraine by the United States and have been used to devastating effect in that country. And right now, there are discussions going on between UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer and President Biden about whether to allow the Ukrainians to use missiles like this, along with the British Storm Shadow long-range missile, to strike targets on Russian soil. Now, we have been hesitant to supply this equipment to the Ukrainians over the last few years at risk of escalating the conflict. And now they're debating whether or not to allow them to use these long-range missiles to strike targets on Russian soil. Now, the question then becomes, if that gets approved, as we're being pressured to do, what would be the Russian response? Vladimir Putin has basically said, if these missiles are used against targets in Russia, then we would basically be in a state of war with NATO, because NATO would be supplying the missiles, NATO would be supplying the launch platform, as well as NATO supplying the targeting data via satellites or AWACS. And does it really matter then if it's a Ukrainian actually pushing the button, if every other step in the process is a NATO country doing that? And so potential responses by the Russians, if this is allowed, would be to supply high-end anti-ship missiles to the Houthis, which the United States is currently engaged with in something of a stalemate. And I think that's a generous assessment of the situation in the Red Sea right now. Also, the Russians could respond by striking British military targets near Russian territory. They're actually threatening new nuclear tests, which would be the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union that new nuclear tests were conducted by the Russians. And they're also talking about deploying conventional missiles near U.S. territory or that of its allies. So there are talks ongoing right now that could potentially dramatically escalate the conflict in Ukraine. And thus concludes This Week in Doom.
Good job, Jack.
Thank you.
I have two. Oh, sorry. I have two questions, comments. The first question, Jack, did you hear about that story about that tanker that did catch on fire and how long it took people to get out there to, it's basically, it could have been the size of the Exxon Valdez spill, but they were bickering over who was actually going to go out there and recover that boat. And it took so long that the Houthis went back and reboarded it, and it was just burning out there for weeks. Like, I don't know exactly how long. Did you hear that story?
Yeah, I forget the name. That ship was hit a couple of weeks ago. The crew abandoned ship. They left it burning and adrift in the Red Sea. And of course, who wants to do a salvage operation in a war zone? You've got the Houthis are sending surface drones, missiles,
The
aerial
Navy,
drones.
perhaps?
Yeah, the Navy. And then it becomes a question of, well, whose Navy? You've got the French are supposedly helping out in the Red Sea right now, but, helping out, the French frigates are only escorting the French ships, and everybody else is being left to fend for themselves. You've got U.S., you've got Indian, you've got British naval assets there. But guys, this is a whack-a-mole approach. We're shooting down cheap, outdated cruise missiles and $20,000 drones with $2.3 million naval interceptors, which we can't make very many of. That's not being spoken about very much. The U.S., our equipment is devastatingly effective, but it's outrageously expensive and it's really hard to make. And our supply chain has somewhat atrophied over the years. So, we can't really escalate the Red Sea conflict, because if we do, it's going to weaken our defensive posture in other areas like Taiwan, South China Sea. The question of who's going to go recover this tanker, it's not so cut and dry. Obviously, everybody just assumes the Americans are going to do it. And then the next time some conflict pops up somewhere else, they're just going to assume the Americans are going to do it. And when you've got the French are just saying, we're going to help our ships and nobody else, well, it doesn't really make me want to put our guys in harm's way. And for what? For the Houthis? The Navy's doing a tremendous job with what they're being allowed to do, but they're fighting with one arm behind their back. They're not being allowed to shoot back. They're not, the politicians are choosing the targets, much like, part of the recipe for disaster in Vietnam. Oh, we don't want to escalate, so you can hit this target, which doesn't really accomplish anything, but you can't hit this target because we're afraid of what the press might say. And so it's not really a recipe for success. Honestly, I don't know what the hell we're doing in the Red Sea, but we're not winning.
Yeah, it was a really interesting article in a military magazine. I wish I remember where I read it, but really talking about kind of the state of our Navy, the equipment, we would have gone, if it were 10 to 15 years ago. Instead, it's Lloyd's of London is bickering over the salvage mission. So I just kind of think it's very interesting that we go around thinking that we still have a Navy like we used to have, and we really don't. The other thing, a question comment I had is another tricky subject, Jack, but I thought it was really interesting that the CPI data came out the way it did and all right in time, like essentially around the debate, right? And what did what did one of the candidates come out? The very first thing that was said was on housing. And so, I think I've been saying this for some time, but this is the key issue, which is kind of crazy because neither one of them have an actual plan to address it. And so, what do you think about the fact that this? I mean, in some ways, I don't think were people expecting shelter to increase this month.
Look, I mean, lost in the nuance of like the month over month data. Fact is, housing is not affordable, and
Right.
nobody's got a plan to address it. You're right. The debate, in my opinion, was a disgrace. The topic of spending didn't even come up once. We were talking about freaking in vitro fertilization. They spent airtime to talk about in vitro fertilization, but not about spending in Washington, D.C., which means neither candidate is going to do anything about it. All they're going to do is pump more money into the housing market, either through lower interest rates or QE or outright helicopter money to people, which is, hey, I guess we haven't learned our lesson. I thought we did because we tried that BS in 2020, and that's what got us here. And like the insane imbeciles that we are, we're saying, oh, if we just do more of that, it'll fix the problem. It won't. And so, in my opinion, and I guess it's kind of on me. I should have mentioned the debate at some point in that segment, but I just think the debate was an embarrassment. I think regardless of which candidate you support, you should be embarrassed by that debate. It's a reflection of us as a country, and it was a horrible, horrible showing for us.
Agreed. Travis, that's it for me.
Did I overdo it?
Well, yeah, I mean, hey man, I'm embarrassed for a lot of reasons, that being one of the reasons I'm embarrassed. I want to read this comment here, have you respond, Jack, but I did have one question for you. When you come to Houston next week, are we going to go shark fishing or not?
Let's do some shark fishing, brother.
Okay.
Let's go shark.
Because Melody, I just want you to know, I asked Jack, okay, you used to, fish in the Bering Sea, right? Like how far off the grid you want to go. So we'll see.
Not in the Bering Sea, North Atlantic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm crazy, but I'm not nuts.
Yeah, commercial fishing. Yeah, all right. Well, it's going to get crazy when you get here, but here's a comment from It's, and just real quick, It's, thank you for helping. Thank you for helping with the community and grow it, and we appreciate your effort and what you do for us and the community. It's is saying, hard for me to believe, also the emails that we get, hard for me to believe the number and reports when my grocery bill is up 23% over the last 3 weeks. So what do you think is a better indicator, Jack? Do you think it's the data, the Fred data, or do you think it's the grocery store?
Well, the CPI, which the BLS puts out, they do their best to try, and I use that term loosely because there's obviously, I'm sure there's political influence, but they try to capture everything, right? Washing machines, blenders, sporting goods equipments, movie theater tickets, right? But they capture a lot of things that the average person doesn't really care about, right? I mean, most people, especially after the inflation of the 2020s, most people care about rent, food, and their utilities. Because there is just nothing left after they pay those three things. They're broke. And so they don't care what the cost of movie theater tickets have done. They don't care that the cost of airline fares are down. They haven't taken a vacation in 4 years. And yet all of those things that the average consumer no longer has money for, those things, their prices are starting to come down or starting to fall slower, while the things that the average consumer does need are still going up, or at least have not come down at all. And so the pain felt by the average consumer, I think, is amplified, and it's not captured in the CPI, which tries to capture all that other nonsense that the average person doesn't really care about. So, I do think stories like that, and I think stories like Nan is telling here, they're probably going to come up more in the recession talk that we have later, because, you got the muckety mucks and the financial elites are like, oh, everything is fine. Everything is great. My stocks are up. The average person doesn't own stocks. The average person
bacon's $10. Yeah, exactly.
They care about what's their income and what are their bills. And unfortunately, that calculus doesn't look good for 80 to 90% of the country.
Yep. Melody, whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, you can present my screen.
Okay.
I like to always do the most boring stories. Okay, so today we're going to do some more deep diving into China, the second largest economy. Just a quick reminder to everyone that China is number 2 when it comes to who owns United States Treasury securities. So always just keep that in mind as we go through some of these stories. But today I want to talk. So it was a busy week on China this week. These are all the headlines. One, they're raising their retirement age. Another is that our legislators went crazy this week, passing some legislation, which I'm going to talk about. And then just their economy, which was, I'll update us all at the end of this story. That'll come second. So, but again, this is the second largest economy, and it is factoring large in our political discourse these days. So, quickly, oh my, Isaiah, oh goodness. Sorry, we just got a super chat and it distracted me. I thank you so much. We are trying, and we are not putting the comments up except Travis just.
Oh my gosh, I just did it, Melody. I didn't know what to do. I got freaked out. That's so much money, Isaiah. What are you doing, man?
I think Isaiah earned an interruption for that one.
Isaiah,
yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Travis and I are trying to figure out how we can get to California, so that is very helpful. Okay, back to the story.
Okay,
thank you so much. Okay, so it was tough on China Week in Congress. This is from NBC News. One of the few issues that both parties agree on. So quickly, from drones to drugs, that was very clever of them, I think. House lawmakers sought to portray themselves as tough on China as they returned to work this week, taking up more than 24 measures aimed at countering Beijing's technological, political, and economic influence. I mean, this is kind of, as we go through these guys, you're going to be shocked that our Congress actually accomplished this stuff. The blitz of 28 mostly Republican-led bills during China Week has been criticized by Democrats as a ploy to make Republicans look stronger against China, a key foreign policy issue in the final weeks before the election. But many of the measures passed with bipartisan support at a time when viewing the world's second largest economy primarily as a geopolitical rival is one of the few issues both Republicans and Democrats can agree on. So we're going to go through what was passed, because I think this is important. So one of the first bills was the biotech companies, the Biosecure Act. Do we all feel biosecure? I don't feel biosecure, but basically, this would prohibit federal contracts with several Chinese biotech companies and those that do business with them. And now, this reminds me very much, Jack, of kind of, how in some of the stories you've done, folks have gotten around some of these, laws around kind of not being able to use the technology. So this is going to be very interesting to track and follow. And so the Chinese companies whose work includes cancer research and manufacturing for American drug makers say data privacy is not at risk. So this is the Chinese response, and they're saying, we are disappointed that the U.S. legislative process is being used to pick winners and losers. And another Chinese response, deeply concerned about the legislation's impact on U.S. leadership in biotechnology, innovation, drug development, and patient care. So next thing, Hong Kong. So this is kind of interesting. They're looking to close the economic trade offices in Washington for Hong Kong. And so this is kind of interesting that we would take that both overwhelmingly pass this bill. So both sides of the House overwhelmingly pass this just because they feel that essentially there's too much political connection between Hong Kong, which of course is under the one country, two systems. And so they're thinking of shutting down these offices. And Travis and Jack, if you want to stop me at any time as we go through these, please do so.
Well, I mean, do you think that they're, as far as China and Taiwan and all that, do you think it has to do with the chips? and the technology to make chips? Do you think that that all of this is kabuki theater? Maybe we could talk about this again, but I'm just
Yeah.
thinking here, like, how much of China's responding and the U.S. acting is just complete nonsense to confuse us. That's all I'm.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is nonsense, but yeah, let's chat about that because I would kind of agree. It's a lot of performance, right? A lot of performance. Drones. Another bill would bar new drones from the Chinese manufacturer DJI from working on U.S. communications infrastructure, citing national security risks that the company has rejected. And so, what did DJI say? Um, Lawmakers had amplified xenophobic narratives in a quest to support local drone manufacturers and eliminate market competition. It added that the move would hurt not just American hobbyists, but also a broad ecosystem of operators, businesses, and public safety agencies. Um, and China also said the U.S. should stop suppressing Chinese companies under various pretexts. Okay, and then
Can I
this.
just add something real quick
Yeah,
there, Melody? I'm sorry to jump in
absolutely.
on you.
No,
Back to
please do.
the subject about drones and about the hobbyists. Guys, if you follow any of these military channels on YouTube and any of the updates from the front lines, I can tell you these little hobby drones have been weaponized in horrifying capacities in Ukraine. They can drop grenades into a hole the size of the opening of a hatch on a tank. And not just the consumer drones that have been jury rigged to drop hand grenades, but also these FPVs or first person viewpoint drones that are specifically built, things like the US Switchblade that we've been giving. Drones at these small levels, these little anti-personnel drones have added a horrifying element to war for the frontline infantry soldier. So when you hear about these little things, we're not just talking about a little quadcopter drone that a hobbyist is not going to be able to use now because of these trade restrictions. We're talking about the whole theater of war has been changed by drones in a major way. And we're adapting to it because we want to have the best and we want to deny the best to our adversaries. So I'm not surprised to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love this. I mean, and I think you're pointing out a really great point, Jack. As I'm reading, guys, these comments from, China, they're just as good as our media at sort of using wordplay here in PsyOps. And what are they doing in this quote? They're trying to say this is just about like hobby drones. This isn't about exactly what Jack was just talking about. So always keep that in mind. Okay, and then this one, this is the new China initiative. Lawmakers were more divided over an effort to revive the Justice Department's China initiative, a Trump-era national security program meant to counter intellectual property theft at universities and research institutions. Asian American advocacy groups said the program unfairly targeted ethnic Chinese scientists and upended their lives, and it ended in 22. But this measure also passed, guys. So you can see that this is a topic I think a lot of people are interested in. Now, foreign farmland purchases. This is a hot one. I was just looking at a map at some of the foreign farmland, and it is a little kind of scary. Another bill that raised discrimination concerns would limit the sale of agricultural land to foreign nationals from Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. Supporters said it would improve oversight of foreign farmland purchases, including those near sensitive sites. A review by NBC News found that the total amount of U.S. agricultural land owned by Chinese interests and is less than 0.03%. Now, this is interesting, actually, that NBC is sort of, because I've seen the maps of this, and it's not small, but guys, we have a lot of land in the United States, and we have a lot of vacant land in the United States.
What a BS talking point from NBC News there. If I could interject again,
Please do.
0.03% of total U.S. farmland. Well, I mean, most of the U.S. is farmland. I mean,
Correct.
all of everything that isn't the coasts is pretty much farmland in the U.S., right? I mean, there's some desert and there's some forest, but for the most part, the whole middle of the country is farmland. That's not the issue. The issue is buying farmland near U.S. military installations. And I'd like to see NBC News maybe not use such a cherry-picked data point. Why don't you go look at how much of the farmland that just happens to butt up against a U.S. military institution or installation, how much of that is owned by Chinese interests? Because that would be a hell of a lot higher than 0.03%. I mean, anytime
100%.
these media outlets can drive things along racial lines, they just jump at the chance, and it's so petty and it's so transparent that in this case there are legitimate national security concerns. I'm not crazy about them, but to just act like this is a black and white race issue is silly for the press. I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's issues all around, but I think the fact that they do cherry pick this, and Jack, Pennsylvania, I mean, all over this country, we have vacant land. Like, you drive the state of Pennsylvania, east to west, north to south. And so, and I've driven across this country many, many, many times. And so we have more land, like vacant land. You go to somewhere like India, you can't even, there are Taiwan, for instance, there's no, square inch that's not really developed, or there's very little of it. And we have a lot of vacant land. So that is very much cherry picking, in my opinion, as well, Jack. So electric vehicles, we knew this one would come up. Lawmakers narrowly passed 217 to 192. And I looked that one up specifically because this article has a certain tent, as you're saying, Jack. And so I wanted to see if they were being honest or not about the narrow. A measure that would tighten the definition of Chinese components that disqualify vehicles from receiving U.S. EV tax credits. Opponents argued that it would slow U.S. efforts to get more EVs on the roads as part of the broader transition to green technology. Though China is a world leader in the manufacture of electric vehicles and dominates the supply chain for EV batteries, very few of its EVs are sold in the U.S. In May, Biden announced that the tariff on Chinese EVs would increase from 27.5% to 100%. And we know we've seen actually just those ports where there's just thousands and thousands of EVs sitting, right? So, but it's kind of crazy to me on the one hand that this could be a cheap, affordable option for Americans, but we're not going to get access to it. And I think that, of course, that definitely tells you about where we are right now in terms of kind of, I would say, collapsing within when it comes to our foreign policy. And that's really what this whole story is about. And then scientific cooperation. Lawmakers passed a bill. Is anybody else just shocked that this many bills were actually passed by? I personally am shocked. Would require congressional notification before the renewal or extension of the Science and Technology Agreement, or the creation, renewal, or extension of any similar agreement with China. And basically, these are these partnerships which theoretically, no matter what's going on, our scientists should still be able to talk to each other. That's the idea. I think you've mentioned these, though, Jack, or maybe I've read an article somewhere else that talks about how people have used these programs in many ways, and not such great ways.
Well, hey, there's the little detail that U.S. taxpayer funding through the National Institute of Health was sent to that lab in Wuhan, that I think there's still some silly people that are pretending that's not where COVID came from. Did I just get the channel in trouble? We're still acting like that whole disease came because some guy ate a bat, and not the bioweapons lab that's right next to the wet market where the guy ate the bat. And that American taxpayer.
I'm not acting like that. I ain't acting like that.
We're still playing the pretend thing. Are we still doing that? And that was U.S. taxpayer money, which, we're 35 trillion in debt, partially funded that lab. So yeah, maybe we want to think twice about the funding that we're sending to Chinese research institutions, and maybe make sure that funding is not being used to, say, hypothetically create a man-made plague that kills millions of people and cripples the world economy. It's 2020s. Do I need to put this on? I'll put this on. I'll do it.
I'll do it.
All right.
I don't think we'll get in trouble, Jack, because you didn't talk about cotton candy, which is what we seem to always get our notes for. So,
cotton candy. Yeah, that's our new.
Yeah, every time we say cotton candy, we get a note. I don't understand it. Okay, so the second part of this story, but before I anything in there before I move on to kind of where they are with their economy, because if things were going a little different economically, I don't think we would have all these all these laws, right? I mean, this is, and we can talk about this at the end about Taiwan. And I have a very unique perspective because I live there, and I can tell you that the people there very much want to go home, be accepted by China, a lot of them. And so it's we get a lot of narrative spin here in the US, but I think honestly this story comes down more about, it's about the economy and the fact that we are, and Travis will talk about it when you do your segment about recession, right? And so basically all the news last week was on China's slowing economy, extending the gloomy summer slide is what they're saying here in the Wall Street Journal. But you can just see their retail and industrial is just tanking. You know, we're hearing about this all over, you know, retail, like especially from Gucci, all of the high end retail. Very interesting article. I think it was in Bloomberg that went through the only people that seem to be doing okay in China right now are, I always say this wrong, Lululemon. Is it Lululemon or Lulu? How do you say it?
Lululemon. Yep.
Lululemon. My nieces, of course, are obsessed, but I never can seem to say it. Lululemon is doing okay, and some like more homegrown coffee shops. But most of companies in China, or the U.S. companies and brands, or even European brands, are suffering in China right now. So in many ways, as we keep going, I think we're probably just a little bit behind China. I think they're actually front running this deflationary event. Okay, so basically, they, you know, China is trying to get out of this slump, but they're also being very specific that they don't want to do too much fiscal stimulus, and we'll talk about this at the end of this segment. They really, really don't. They really want to sort of create autonomy, it seems, and not kind of go full tilt into, basically what monetary, policy that what we're suffering from in the U.S. Put it that way. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself because I want to get to this one quote that's hilarious. But we'll go quickly through the data, Saturday's data. So of course they're in Sunday now. Show retail sales rose just 2.1% year over year in August, slowing sharply from a 2.7% year over year rise the previous month. Industrial production rose 4.5%, down from 5.1% in July, while investment in buildings, equipment, and other fixed assets slowed to 3.4% for the year through August from 3.6% in the first 7 months. Home prices fell 5.7% year over year in August, data showed, the steepest decline in 9 years, despite government's efforts to stem the property crisis by lowering interest rates, relaxing home purchase restrictions, and pledging to buy unsold homes. The only bright spot is exports, which we talked about on here as well, in terms of, that maybe that nice exports number is not so great for the rest of the world. If you guys remember the discussion we had on China's surplus. So because I got way ahead of myself, I really do want to get to this one quote, but essentially Xi is saying, he urged his Communist Party to work hard to meet the government's goal of 5% growth. But he's not going to take the advice of the International Monetary Fund. So this is craziness, guys. Essentially, I did not know this, and I'm not sure how I did not know this, but the IMF recently called on China and said, hey, we've got a good idea for how you can get out of your housing crisis. And this is very much like the IMF. They do ever so much love to get involved. But essentially, China said no. And they said so the reason why the Wall Street Journal said they said no to the IMF was they were concerned about debt, exchange rates, and financial stability. revisions to Social Security taxation and healthcare that would put households on a sure financial footing have been punted into the future. But a quote from Bloomberg when this came out from that they had, said no to this IMF plan. This was the actual quote. It would be inappropriate for the central government to directly provide fiscal support as it could lead to expectation of future government bailout and therefore moral hazards.
That's the Chinese Communist Party saying that?
Stupid.
This is why I was stumbling all over myself, Jack, because I couldn't get to this quote fast enough because I'm just like, dear God.
This
dear
must be
God.
what going mad feels like. I've got communist China is telling Western banks, piss off. We're not going to directly subsidize our housing market anymore because it might cause moral hazard.
I'm sorry.
How far are we done fall that the communists are the ones saying that?
Yeah.
Come on, guys, we can do better than this.
Yeah. And it actually blew my mind. What's so funny, Jack, is like I almost didn't find that quote because I was like, wait a minute, how did I not hear about it? Because I used to study the IMF in grad school. I was like, how did I not hear about this? So I went to find the source article and I saw this quote. It was hysterical. Okay. And I messed up this slide. The next slide will have this awesome quote down here. Okay. So this is where we'll end this China conversation, but I want, again, everyone to think sometimes when we read these articles on China, it's like looking in a mirror, right? The root of China's problems is a still festering property meltdown that is sapping government revenue, holding back investment, and keeping consumers from spending more freely. Economists at Barclays estimate that if home prices nationwide fell in line with a 30% drop recorded in top cities like Austin, but I know we're talking about China. I forgot. Top cities since 2021, then China's real estate slump has cost the economy $18 trillion in vanished wealth, a staggering sum that I've got a really important point about this last sentence, guys. Staggering sum that adds up to around $60,000 for the average 3-person household in China. So that's theoretically what they've lost, right? Okay. So, what do I have to say? Well, we had forbearance for 18 months. Over 1.8 million borrowers took the payment deferral. And what is the payment deferral? That's where you took all of those foreborn payments and you tacked it on to the back of the loan to be paid either when you pay off the loan or you sell your house. Well, guys, looking at how much that really was per household, it could be in this range, and actually 60,000 could be kind of low for some of this. And so, and if you look at how much vanished wealth, and this is the other thing, I don't think anybody is actually tracking this equity withdrawal. I don't think the Fed is using this in their numbers. I keep saying this everywhere I go, so someone could actually correct me, because I remember how you fill out this information to the Fed. And I am almost positive it's not being included. So, I think it's really important for folks here to understand, one, the Chinese are hurting badly. This is why, foreign buying is down, but they could be hurting so much. It could be a contributor to what's going on in California right now with the motivated selling. And we got Redfin results just yesterday. And that those price declines in California are continuing. So just wanted to, end on this because I think often, as we've already discussed here, we kind of look at China and say, they're the bad guys. It's us versus them. But in reality, a lot of the times it's like we're looking in a mirror.
Melody, fantastic data in that presentation. I was taking notes as you were going through here. And I have so many things I want to like guys, clear your schedule because I'll take up hours if you let me with some of this stuff. First thing I noticed in that last slide, they talked about this $60,000 loss of wealth for an average 3-person household. Since when do we talk about average households in a context of 3 people? In the West, it's always 4. And I think just that little nuance of that data point shows you one of the roots of this problem, the population collapse in China. They are just not making babies. Chinese need to start getting drunk and making bad decisions. I mean, and so do we, and so do the Europeans. So does most of Asia. They're just not having kids. And look, if you've got a property collapse, a shrinking population sure as heck is not going to help you there. So we can see the population collapse just in that 3-person household figure right there. Also, they were talking about a 30% decline in home values. Now, let's get some context there. Now, Melody, you're more connected to the property, and Travis, but wasn't the average decline in the U.S. and the GFC something like 20% overall? Is that ballpark what the average GFC price decline was?
I think it got closer to 30, but I'd have to, I don't know exactly, but I think it was closer to 30, Jack.
Well, and Jack, it also depends on the frequency that they're measuring it. So if you look at quarterly, then it's lower. But if you look at monthly or even yearly, it's higher. And then obviously different markets, new versus existing, but it's about similar to the GFC.
Yeah, I think that number was like from 06 to 09. It was somewhere in the 20s. Maybe it was closer to 30, but it just goes to show you what China has felt is already the GFC from a property values standpoint. It hasn't yet gone financial. They haven't had the meltdown in the banks yet. There's been some stories like there was some bank failures in Henan province that, there was some brutal suppression of customers that were complaining and things like that. But the situation in the China property market so far is almost as bad as the GFC, and it's a long way from over, in my opinion. You also mentioned something, Melody, that caught my attention when you were talking about consumer stocks not doing well in China. And you heard some coffee companies are doing well. That had the hair on the back of my neck sticking up because one of the largest accounting frauds in history was a Chinese coffee company, Luckin Coffee. So when I hear everybody in China is doing terrible, but I hear this coffee company is doing okay, I'm like, watch out for that one. So I'd like to know more about who that coffee company is. And last but not least, on your first slide, you mentioned China's holdings of U.S. Treasuries at $770 billion. That is a huge data point. Huge, because we all hear about how China owns all our debt. We owe all this money to China. Even President Trump made this statement during the debate. And I think anybody who actually looks closely at the data would say, no, we don't owe China. We owe Japan. We owe ourselves. But we do. We owe China $770 billion. But that is down big time. In 2014, that was like 1.35 trillion. All right. So just in the last 7 to 10 years, they have almost cut their holdings of our debt in half. And I'm telling you, when that number gets to zero, watch out.
We're going to have problems.
They saw what happened with the Russians. Yep. They saw the seizure of the Russian assets, the booting from the SWIFT system, all those U.S. treasuries the Russians held. We just took them. I think did we ever end up giving them to Ukraine? We were talking about giving them to Ukraine. So
I think we did. Yeah, I do think we did. Yeah.
So China's not going to sit around and wait for that to happen if they ever move on Taiwan. So that $770 billion is going to keep getting smaller. And, that's going to add to selling pressure on U.S. bonds. That's going to put upward pressure on U.S. interest rates, and it's going to strain the economy. And remember, we just had a presidential debate where nobody even talked about cutting spending. So, we're taking the bond market for granted here. And that $770 billion number in Chinese holdings, that should be a wake-up call, but the world is oblivious to it. That's all I got. Excellent data, Melody. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jack. I thank you for the commentary, because that's what I love, is for you guys to be able to comment on this stuff. And, also not to feel crazy when I find sentences like, the Chinese think, they don't want to create moral hazard.
Can you believe that? Like when communist China is being more fiscally responsible than the West, come on, guys. Like, and, I'm not surprised they reject the IMF proposal, right? Yeah. All these word salad, the IMF, the Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank, they're all going to propose what is in the interests of the financial elites in the West.
Always. That's correct. Always.
The banking cartels that control our government. So I'm not surprised the Chinese rejected that.
Yeah, me neither. What's interesting is that I didn't hear a lot about it. That's fascinating to me. And how dare, in many ways, can you imagine the IMF like showing up? Oh, we've got a plan for you. I mean, but that's what they do everywhere. I mean, that's, they are just the big bully.
I picture some guy like in a top hat dressed like the Monopoly man with a curly mustache.
Yes.
This is an
Yeah.
outrage, and storming out of the room when the Chinese won't play along with them. Like, what do you think they were going to do? Oh, sure, we'll print a whole bunch of yuan and bail out your business interests at our expense.
Yes.
I wonder where they get that. I wonder where they get that from. I have a comment real quick, not really a question, Melody, because I want to throw up a couple things. We got some really good comments, but to me, when I'm hearing all of that and you talk, obviously it's a kabuki theater. I think the real story here, like looking through all that nonsense narrative and manipulation, the real story is China is collapsing. Their economy is collapsing. It has been collapsing. I'm going to dare and say it's probably because of the US and the horrible debt and whatever, but it's pure manipulation. It's pure narrative. And I keep thinking, man, what about the citizens that live there? They keep getting wrapped up in government control games. So government control games. It's let's continue to hide this so we can keep our citizens working, because we need our citizens working. So we're going to, say that what's going on here is, oh yeah, the US and China, US is beating us up, like, oh, US, right? But really is like, actually the citizens have been getting beat up from everyone in the world, from the elites, from the beginning of time. That's kind of what I look at. Want to throw this up, Jack. Actually, Melody, do you want to read this comment? This is a huge super chat.
Yeah. So I had been promising Isaiah we were working on another way to contribute, and you guys know we are working on that, and we should have those links soon. But this is so unbelievably generous. I'll read it. Didn't really want to do this through the Google machine. Don't blame you. But this is for what you have already done, not for anything you're going to do. Peace out. So lovely. I mean, great supporter always. And so this is just unbelievably kind. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much, Isaiah. That's very generous of you. Wow. And we will double our efforts and try to live up to that high standard that you have placed on us. Thank you very much for that vote of confidence and your generosity. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. And just real quick, Isaiah, I appreciate you again. That's a ton of money. You didn't have to do that. It definitely will be used for something good. Melody and I are trying to get back on the road, but we're trying to afford it to do that. So this will probably go towards actually a really great cause. There's not a lot of money generated. So thank you for that. One more comment, Melody, before we go on to the next story. I thought there's a few that were good. Hopefully we'll get to them about the school districts, people going broke, other stories of affordable housing. But this was good. This has to do with China. And you alluded to this a little bit in your story, but Jungle Book is getting out there. China is also buying a ton of residential property in California. And that I was trying to look into a little bit more. Remember about the drug dealer money laundering and then them using that money to purchase real estate? I haven't had a chance to dig into that more, but do you know, and can you respond to this, Melody, in a little bit more detail about do we have proof that China's doing this? And what the hell?
Yeah. No, but honestly though, it's like I just saw Kay Powell join us, or Kenny Cat PhD. It's like that, in Nashville, what they said for about 6 years was that 100 people or something like that were moving to Nashville every day. This is kind of, and actually Kenny Cat debunked that whole narrative on X Twitter by showing some actual data. So the Chinese have definitely been buying in Florida, been buying in California. And in many ways, you can talk to people that live out there. They'll talk about how they kind of trade houses. Like it's not about shelter. They're really using it to park wealth. Well, what's been happening, what we've been hearing from realtors in these locations is that the Chinese have started to sell. And so I absolutely agree. They were huge buyers, but it's that CNN article that says, foreign buying was down 37% year over year. And so I think that based on what's going on in China, and people don't believe this, but it goes back to something Jack said specifically. Everybody thinks the Chinese, especially the dissident Chinese, are going to keep their wealth here. But ever since we seized those Russian money, Russian assets, that game has changed. And so I think that actually they are becoming net sellers. And I am trying to get the proof exactly, Travis. You know how hard it is, especially in some places in California, because they won't let you get those deeds. Because They don't want
And
people to have, information of where stars live. That's their reasoning. Yeah.
and it's not in their name. A lot of times too, they make us some type of shell
Oh, yeah, they
company.
do
They
it,
buy it on an
LLC. Yeah,
yeah, with all
100%.
cash. So even if we
Yeah.
wanted to, it will be hard. The emphasis, I think we should like find the company, and then with the company name, use that to look for title records in California, since it is a disclosure state. But it's like,
Yeah.
man, I mean, what battle do we pick, Melody? I mean, we just don't have that much time to do all of these things.
Yeah, I mean, if listen, I've even tried to organize a group of volunteers because there is just so much data out there and so much research, but we don't have the time, and it's not easy to access. So,
All right, I took myself
right.
off mute. I'm gonna
Oh,
go
good job.
into yeah, thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
guess Jack must be rubbing off on me, but I want to go into asking the question now. Let me make a timestamp. And by the way, for the viewers, we will have timestamps this time. So that's what we've come up with, right? We're gonna do some timestamps, Melody, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So I'm gonna ask Jack and Melody the question, and we're gonna talk about whether or not we're already in recession. This may matter to some people, it may not matter. Just depends your level of maybe kind of I wanted to say like how awake are you, right? That's what I wanted to say, but I'm going to hold off on that. And before I ask these questions to you guys, I have a couple questions written for both Jack and Melody. I want to present you guys with recessionary warning data. All right, so Jack, let me present this data, man. I know you're going to be chomping at the bit, and you know what? Come at me, man. Just come at me, bro. You know what I mean? And if you want to interrupt me, you interrupt me, man. You come at me, bro. But I want to get this. Let me get the data out first. All right. I want to get the data out first. And but again, if you have anything to say it. This is a little bit of new data for this channel. And again, I want to go over a couple of these things. We're going to talk about the McKelvey indicator. But before I do that, let me see, where's the definition? What is the McKelvey recession indicator? Basically, what this is, guys, just to give you a quick definition, take the current value of the 3-month unemployment rate average, subtract 12-month low. And if the difference is 0.3 or 30 basis points, then a recession has started. Now, the interesting thing is Claudia Sham actually apparently copied her indicator from this guy and never gave him any acknowledgement. I had no idea. That's crazy because I've been talking about the Psalm. But anyways, this is very interesting because this has not had any false negatives since 1953. Okay, so their data is suggesting that we are already in a recession. That's what I wanted to tell you guys. Let me go to the 3 charts and we'll move on real quick because I don't want to spend too much time here, but I did want to acknowledge that we have multiple indicators. So here is a very interesting indicator here. This is the unemployment rate versus the job opening rate. And when you see it going inverted, kind of, you guys see how it's reversed the trajectory inward, kind of going towards the center now. When you have that type of trajectory, that again, going back to 1953, this is so crazy, that generally is leading to recession. Again, look at here. Same thing happened during the great financial crisis. Okay, the blue line went down, the orange line went up. Orange line is unemployment, job openings, blue line, right? So not as many jobs. And then employment going up. I'm sorry, the blue line's unemployment rate, vacancy is the orange rate. I apologize, guys. But anyways, going back to the dot-com bubble, you see the same trajectory where the vacancy rate is going up. Unemployment rate is also going, where is this at? Okay, going down into the recession. I mean, my point in telling you guys this is this just is more data. I mean, at this point, we can find data all over the place. That's the point I'm trying to make. The data is everywhere. Again, here's McKelvey recessionary indicator. And what we're seeing here is, again, when this is going up, again, let's just look at the lines real quick, okay, just so we kind of understand. You see the trajectory here. You see the indicator here. And this is demonstrating to us the change of unemployment rate. Okay, so again, this is measuring what's going on behind the scenes as far as like how fast is the unemployment going up, right? So that's kind of what this is. All right, so behind the scenes stuff, guys, that's really what that's what this is. And look at the trajectory. So the trajectory is skyrocketing. And again, going back to every single recession, literally, there's no recession that I can see here. Maybe you guys can correct me, going back to 1953, where we did not have this indicator shoot up like this. That did not lead to recession. Do you guys see? I mean, a little bit right here. You see that right after we went through that dot-com bubble, it got to 0.48, but right now we're at 0.54. So, I mean, at this point, guys, there's so much fraud and manipulation going on. It's no one set of data. Now we have multiple sets of data. So we don't just have to look at the 10 and the 2. right? We don't have to look at that anymore. Now, this is probably the most revealing set of data and the most fascinating set of data to me. This is the job openings PMES recessionary indicator. And this is crazy. And you guys, you could jump in here in a minute here. This is crazy because this set of data is telling us not only are we in recession, this set of data is saying that we have been in recession. Now, the question is are we going to go into depression, which is basically an extended recession? So all of those things are possible, but I want you guys to look at this trajectory. Okay, going back to other recessions, keep in mind we peak. Okay, this is job openings peak either on like the outside of a recession or right after the recession. So in other words, we peak when we're already in recession or out of recession. And we've peaked. Look at this is what I'm showing you guys. We've already peaked. We're on our way down. Look at this, the GFC. So the GFC peaked right on the other side of recession. So we were already in recession. You see that? And then several months goes by and then this thing starts plummeting. I wonder if that has to do with the manipulation of data. Probably. But look at the dot-com bubble. Again, we peaked right after recession in the dot-com bubble. Isn't this crazy? And look at the 1990s when we had real estate decline, even with low volume of transactions and low foreclosures and still nationwide home decline. Just saying, look at same thing here, guys. We peaked right on the other side of recession. So just right towards the end of recession, it peaks and it plummets. So my point is this data is getting super fascinating. It's getting super interesting. Do you guys have any comments you want to make before I go into the other string of data?
I would just say thank you for giving McElvey credit for the recession indicator because I am not the president of the Claudia Sahm fan club, as you may have surmised based on my entire live stream that was dedicated to her yesterday. I think Claudia Sahm is a political hack. I think she's an intellectual coward who blocks anybody on X who challenges her stupid ideas. And if you just search Claudia Sahm blocked on X, you will get dozens and dozens of examples from very credible economists, like guys like Mike Green, who are legit brains in the space. And they ask her questions and she just blocks them because she's a coward and her ideas suck and she can't defend them. And she ripped off McElvey and named his rule after her because I think she went from the 3-month average to the 6-month average and changed the name of the rule. And everybody calls her a world-renowned economist. She's not. She very famously penned an op-ed in the New York Times in October of 2016 lamenting the fact that monetary policy decisions were being made by men and that all of the monetary policy decisions of 2020, which were like wildly dovish, right? $6 trillion printed. She wanted to print more money to fight climate change and promote wealthy
Cotton candy. Cotton candy.
Any questions about the data?
Candy. Oh, there goes the context. I just got us contexted again. Sorry.
You got
cotton candy.
Trillions more to fight cotton candy.
Jack, he does not like this lady. Jack, that wasn't what the story was about. That wasn't what the story
I know, but
what about the
Hold on. Let him prep.
Anyway, she's out there now saying my rule, which I stole from this other guy, no longer applies because now I work for a political campaign and I'm trying to get a job in DC so I can sell my decisions for speaking fees after I get out of office. Well, now she's saying, no, it's not a recession. They just try to redefine recession every time. They're so predictably treacherous. And so I'm glad you went with McElvey. That's all.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Right. Just quickly, something I think everybody saw Jamie Dimon, or, at least this is what we heard coming out saying that we could be setting up for something worse than a recession, which would be a depression. So, I think this data is very interesting. Keep going, Trav.
Thank you, Melody. You put me back in spirits because Jack just got me mad at that lady. I'm just gonna, you know what? I'm gonna go off on my own rant and I'm gonna talk about manipulation. I'm gonna talk about stuff like I'll go off on my own rant, but let's stick back to the data. Why does Jack gonna have all the fun, Melody? Melody is always like big Jack. Anyway, I'm just gonna keep going. Melody, I want to have fun like Jack. All right. Here's the 10 and the 2. All right, here's the 10 and the 2. This is a recessionary indicator. The inversion is no longer. All right. So I just wanted you guys to know that we are now uninverted, or there is reversion that has happened. And when I go back and I look at how long until uninversion before a technical recession happens, it's like 6 months. But again, at this point, and I'm going to ask Melody and Jack here in a second, like, when did we go into recession, right? Because right now I think it's becoming clear that the reason we're not in technical recession, besides the fraud, manipulation, and narrative, is the Keynesian economic printing, is a 0% interest rates. And really that hurts us as Americans. And our taxpayer dollars are being stolen to keep a system afloat that we don't even want. I don't want this type. Anyways, I'm so sorry. Here's the 10 and the 2, guys. Okay, this is a super important recessionary indicator. It's uninverted now. Let's keep going. Here's the trajectory of the unemployment rate going up. And Jack and I mentioned, I remember when this first started going up, Jack, we're like, wait a minute, look at it, it's going up. Anytime we go into recession, the unemployment rate goes up. And then we went back in history and like, oh my gosh, there's not really been a time where unemployment's gone up that did not lead to recession. How interesting is that? And so this is going up. And then Melody, I think you're going to like this one. Okay, this is the Challenger report. This is about job cuts. All right, take a look at this. Let me zoom in here. All right, so here's the top 5 industries of job cuts right now. Anything, you guys notice anything about this? Anything kind of pop out at you on the recent job cuts? Anything at all? What do you think, Melody? Melody's shaking her head. What do you got, Melody? What you got? What do you think? What do you think? No?
I'll tell you, it sure looks like big tech is financing their billions of dollars in blown capex and artificial intelligence by cutting people. So, yeah, what's paying for those GPUs? Unemployment benefits are paying for those GPUs. That's what's happening. Okay, good one. Good one. All right, I'm going to keep going then. All right, what I was hoping you guys were going to say is the government. Look at the government. They're like, okay, yeah, you're right. We're broke. They're starting to figure it out. But look at the amount of job cuts from 2023 to 2024 overnight. And this is just the year to date. Overnight, the government's like, you know what? We're going to get on that list. And not only we're going to get on that list, we're going to crush that list because again, they went from like no job cuts to like, holy smokes, hitting the panic button. They are the number 2 industry right now making job cuts. That is the United States government. And hey, that is go ahead. I'm sorry. I know I'm stepping on your toes here a lot today, but you had sent some stuff via text earlier when we were talking about government job cuts, because I think most people see that government number and they're thinking the federal government, but you and Melody have actually done a lot of research into that subject. It's not really federal government jobs that are being cut, is it? As far as that specific data with the Challenger report, I believe that is also in counting state data as well, not just federal data. I would have to go to the methodology on that Challenger report to see how they're deriving it. But we're seeing stories like municipal job cuts because of budget constraints, right? Teachers are starting to get laid off.
Teachers, sheriffs, yes, you're seeing it all over the country right now as we get close to year end. And, I think it was, I mentioned this morning in our group text as well, but when I was diving into California to see that Newsom actually cut $1.1 billion from affordable housing. And so, I mean, Travis, how many times a day do you and I hear that the government's going to save housing? Well, the other story you've been doing with Mitch on, all this fraud and how it relates to these municipal governments, basically, I think just to have law and order, that's going to be the government's focus because they're gutting, the federal government, because the states are about to just implode on themselves.
Well, Melody, they're like, okay, it's not too bad yet, but it's in motion. And that's what we're trying to explain to people. Like, look under the hood and see what's going on now, because if you wait till mainstream, it's too late. It's not too bad, but I've been finding reports and more stories where there are layoffs in the police department because of the budget deficit. So these are facts, and that's not even talking about unfunded liabilities like their pensions. Their pensions are gone. Show me where they're at if they're not gone. Show me where the money's at. There's no one knows. But regardless, it is spiraling, Melody. Look at it from 2023 to 2024. That escalation is insane. I don't think that there is another year-over-year industry that's had this level of job cut growth. Seriously, is this 100 times more? This is absolutely crazy. But let me show you guys one other thing. Let me keep going. This is also crazy. In the job cut information, here's Q1 of 2024 for job cuts. 257,000 job cuts in first quarter alone in 2024. Okay, we also had that in 2023 where Melody, Jack, and I were trying to warn so many people like you guys, and actually a little bit in 2022, like, hold up, save your money, rebudget, hedge yourself. It's going to get a lot harder. It's going to get a lot tighter. We got to get ahead of this thing. So we knew in 2023, we knew in 2022 what was happening. But look at 2024, 257,000 job cuts. Let's go back to the last time we've had that, minus the lockdowns. See this? Last time we had that level of job cuts was during the GFC, 2009 GFC. Now, look at this, Melody. Okay. When recession had already started. So Q1 of 2008, the recession had already started. We have more job cuts. Again, we have more job cuts right now when we compare the first quarter of 2008. So I think it's,
you know what,
I
we
think it's an
didn't have,
interesting thing.
Trav, what we didn't have back in 2008 was millions of gig work that was counted as jobs. Every Uber and Lyft driver is counted as a job created in the economy. Every Airbnb is counted as a job in the economy. And so those job number stats, you know, when we talk about the number of jobs created, you got to look at the quality of the jobs, because there's just so much BS work out there right now that really, it masks the real weakness in the labor market, in my opinion.
Yes, but also on the other side of the coin, that is partially potentially why this is higher as well, right? Because if we have more of that crap jobs to get rid of, then that would inflate this number. So so you made a great point. In perspective, nevertheless, the trajectory, right? The trajectory, the sheer amount of, you know, pain here, and even these numbers have indexes that are probably fraudulent and cooked and based on a narrative. But nevertheless, I mean, they got nowhere else to go. I mean, the fraud is exploding in their faces. We got so much data, guys. So much data. Last set of data, and then I want to ask you guys a question. This bad boy updated. I don't know if you guys saw that, updated a few days ago. This is so crazy. They keep playing with these numbers. They're trying to slide this under the door. They don't want us to know about this. This is the year to date. This is not the total debt. This is not the total government debt. This is how the government is spending money. This is how your government and our government is spending our money, the money that we pay to our government. This is how they're spending it. Okay. Year to date. And we have one more month. This is to the fiscal years to October. So we got one more month here. We are at a deficit spending right now of $1.89 trillion. Now, in comparison, last year, look at this, guys. This is so crazy. Last year, we're up 24%. That means their reckless spending habits are 24% worse than last year. And let's just one more thing. Okay, so right now, year to date, we have deficit 1.9. Take a look at this, guys. Let me see if it's on here. So we're at 1.9. Now, when we compare the deficit, okay, to 2009, the GFC, the deficit was 1.42 trillion. Now, when we adjust for inflation, you want to know how much it is? You want 1.42 trillion when we adjust for inflation. Do you guys, okay.
I'm not sure I want to know.
1.9 trillion. So even when we adjust 2009 dollars for inflation for today, just to make this a fair comparable, it's still 1.9 trillion. So no matter how you look at this, we don't have a strong economy. That's what I'm trying to say. If we had a strong, thriving economy, I don't think that we would be seeing government jobs and deficit. And if we weren't in recession, I don't think that we would be seeing those job cuts. And so the question is that I would like to ask you guys, first of all, Melody, you may know a little bit more about this. Do you think if question is are we already in recession? But there's a sub question. So number one, are we already in recession? The same question you, Jack. But also, do you believe that they're just going to revise the data from the past overnight? Like, in other words, can we have been in recession for years? What is your take on whether or not we're in a recession now?
Can you share my screen, please?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've talked a lot about Emil Kalinowski's theory that we've been in a silent depression, and somebody posted this chart yesterday. I just want to go over it. It's a few years old, but I want, something we've talked about is that the trend lines were broken after the GFC. And so you can see here the long depression, which was from 1873 to 1896. That's the gray dotted line. And you can look at GDP at where it was during the long depression, right? The Great Depression from 1929 to 1947. So that's going to be the dotted blue lines. and then the silent depression from 2007. And so if you look at the legend on the bottom of the chart, it's year 0 up to year 24. And so this is, like I said, a couple years old, but you can see this is where we were from a GDP perspective. And so when you look post August of 2007, you can absolutely see these trend lines break all over. So, I think you know how I feel about this question, Travis. To me, it doesn't really matter if, and I think Widge said this as well in the chat. The forgotten American is in a recession. And I don't care about anybody else. They're in a depression, actually. And this is why we have deaths of despair increasing exponentially. We have people missing from the workforce. We have people missing from society. I mean, and I think Rudy Havenstein, I don't know if you guys know him, but on X Twitter, he's a great personality. Also, he's been a huge supporter of us. And, he is just absolutely fantastic. Travis, he's the one who posted all that text we used on the Austin video, the inflation quote that we used at the end.
Oh, so, great quote.
Yeah, Rudy just did a great kind of deep dive into a book from, just after Weimar inflation and what it was like in Berlin. And, the argument that it talks about is just when, money gets divorced from, work, essentially, like from productivity.
Yes.
That's a reflection of ourselves. And, we also feel inconsequential. And I think that what we've seen in society since the GFC is that folks no longer feel like their work has any meaning. They don't feel like they can live meaningful lives, and they don't feel like they can make it. And so a lot of people have just stopped trying. And I wish I had the chart of deaths of despair. It's horrible. It's, and it's a lot of our young people who are just entering, life, the adulthood, because they really don't think they can get ahead. And of course, I absolutely remember what it was like to get out of school with an just staggering amount of debt. And I remember laying and thinking about, how am I ever going to pay this off? And what I knew absolutely is I could never have a job doing what I wanted to do, ever. I would never, ever be able to do that. And that's what I knew. And that's why I went to work for a mortgage company.
Yeah, that sucks.
So anyway, but that's our reality. And what we hope to do here is, again, we can vote with our dollars. We have the agency to make change. It's hard, but we have to make the effort.
I want to ask you, Jack, but man, Melody, you hit my soul. It's almost like our own tax dollars, like the money that I'm paying to the government is being used against me. Like my own money I'm paying to the government to keep me safe and things in bounds.
Almost gave you COVID.
It's working against me. So the fact I'm paying taxes, and that same tax money is used to take things away from me, because our tax money is used to bail out the banks. Quantitative easing is purchasing mortgage-backed securities, is purchasing assets that are usually troubled from the banks so that they can continue the Ponzi scheme. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, who's really running the government right now? Is it the bankers, or is it us that are paying for it? I mean, seriously, that's a fair question. But Jack, to you, are we already in recession?
For 90% of the country, yes, we are. And unfortunately, the 10% that isn't in a recession, they control most of the money. They control most of the flow of information. And so, no, we're not in a recession anywhere you look. And, anybody who claims we're in a recession is shouted down as a doomer. And okay, that's why I wear that proudly here on my shoulder, because I actually touch grass. I actually go outside every now and then and talk to people. And, look, what we just started the show with, Big Lots going bankrupt, shutting down 550 out of 1,389 stores. Ask somebody who works at Big Lots how the economy's doing. Ask somebody who works at BurgerFi that just shut down. And what was the quote from BurgerFi? Wait, I have it right here. Give me a second. Okay, BurgerFi said that a drastic decline in post-pandemic consumer spending amid sustained inflation and increasing food and labor costs was causing their restaurant to go belly up. And then Ally Financial talking about how delinquencies in credit card financing are going so much higher than expected, and they expect it to get worse. Why? Because higher cost of living and rising unemployment. geez, guys, it sure sounds very recessionary anywhere outside of CNBC. It really looks very recessionary. But you know what? You've got a government that $1.9 trillion based on 2023 GDP numbers, that's 7% of GDP, just new deficit spending. The fiscal year's not even over yet. It's going to be closer to 8% before this fiscal year ends. And so we're sitting here congratulating ourselves. Oh, estimates are for 3% economic growth. Well, 8% of our whole economy is government deficit spending, which means we would have negative 5% economic growth if we didn't have that deficit spending. It's a sugar high. It's just easy money. It's debt spending. It's like, we're in the house, dad lost his job, mom lost her job, but we're spending all this money on a credit card to buy all this nice new stuff to make it look like we're doing so well. We're not.
Good comment. Actually, I took it as a comment, but it's a question. Can we do anything to destroy the system? I think it's worded very interesting, but I think the point and emphasis I understand. And I'm going to just say right now that, brother, like what I'm trying to tell you is the system's already destroyed, my friend. And actually, what is holding up the system right now is us and the taxpayers not doing anything about it. That's what's holding it up. If we did something about it tomorrow, it would be done. It would be destroyed. And so but when I look at your question seriously, and tone it down a little bit, one of the things is understanding what's going on, empowering yourself, and then taking the necessary actions to make change. And one of the things that I'm trying to help with is leading people into their central appraisal districts to fight the overassessment on their house. What will happen by doing that is it will clearly bankrupt municipalities. If municipalities are bankrupt, it will force actions from our state officials that we vote into office, which will bring a public light to what's going on, because the biggest problem of all, my friend, is the apathy. It is the apathy in this world. And I would say that would probably be the biggest thing to destroy the system. It would be enough people caring. That's all I got.
Get involved locally. I mean, it's so important to I just saw here in East Tennessee, people, upset about their property taxes. And Tennessee has, I think, the lowest tax rate, I believe, on property. It is very low. You would be very shocked to see how low it is. But they're upset here because of 15%, whatever it is, nobody was planning on a 15%, raise increase in cost. So you have to get involved locally. This is how all this stuff, and we had one of our good supporters, Dan Barrett, earlier in the show, make a comment about what's happening up near Syracuse with that Micron plant, and all the promises that are being made to them. And he's going to every single one of those meetings and asking questions like, okay, what exactly are the jobs coming? Tell me, what's the pay? And they can't answer. They can't. So, I just think what he's doing is so great, is he's demanding accountability from these guys. And so that's what I would say. Get involved locally. That's how you break the system. Start where you are. It's that old saying, grow where you're planted. If you're not in DC, you can start locally.
Yeah. And I mean, I pray and try to let the Spirit lead me as well. Melody knows all about that, huh, Melody? Jack, anything? Are you ready to start your story, Melody?
I'll just say real quick, financial repression is their plan, right? Devaluing your savings is how they plan to bail out their bad decisions. So it's always a good idea to have a small but responsible amount of your wealth stored outside the financial system. I got my little silver bar here, my America flag bar. I like gold. I like silver. I like Bitcoin. All of those assets are doing very well this year. Gold just closed at an all-time high yesterday. Bitcoin hovering around near an all-time high. Silver not doing quite as well, but they're all up majorly year to date. That's not by accident. It's because we know more currency debasement is on the horizon, and those assets are responding accordingly. So you can partially opt out of their system. Don't go pour your whole life savings into little small silver bars, because you still need to make a mortgage payment. You still got to pay your utilities. But you can at least protect a small amount of your reserves from what they're doing to the currency.
Well said. You ready, Melody?
Sure. Let me share that. Oh, sorry.
No, look at, like, by the way, I got your email to this comment down here. Okay. Just because I always say, like, we can't fathom $1 trillion right? Like you can't fathom how much money that is. So look at what they did to break it down for our viewers and for us. 1 trillion seconds ago is 33,000 years. So a trillion seconds is 33,000 years, to put it in perspective. That's such a great breakdown. Sorry,
Wow.
buddy, I got you.
Okay. So my last story is not really a story. It's more like a public service announcement. Because I think it's really important. We talk about the data out there and how, it's very limited. And so we try to triangulate and look at a whole bunch of sources of data, just like you just did, Travis, to get a sense of what's going on. And so I really want, kind of like those old PSAs where maybe on Halloween they tell you don't take unwrapped candy. What I'm going to say here is please use this data source. This was started after COVID. It's kind of creepy in a way, to be honest with you, some of the things that they ask about. But at the same time, it's really important. And what can you find here? I'm going to just show you kind of the different questions that they ask. Hopefully, no, that's not the place I wanted to go. 1 second, guys. And while I'm getting this up, we might want to talk at the end. It looks like there's some kind of issue, and this is thanks to Julius of Miami, that for the SMCI Edgar filing, Jack, it's forbidden. Did you see that from Just Dario?
I haven't seen it. I do know Supermicro missed their deadline to file their 10K yesterday. Their 15-day grace period expired. Let me check
check out what Just Dario is saying right now. It looks like it started with their filing, but now it's spreading to other tickers on Edgar. So that is very interesting. Okay, so while Jack is checking that out, I just want to show you guys. So these are essentially, they do these cycles every month where they go out and they've basically identified 1 million households and data parameters to kind of represent all of our households. And they go out and you can look, they'll actually publish how many people responded. And what I find fascinating about this survey, guys, is that respondents are increasing. Okay. And I think that has to do with what they're talking about, what actually is being talked about in these surveys, because a lot of it is about food sufficiency, anxiety, housing. And the ones we want to show you, the housing table. So this one I'm going to open up for you guys, just so I want you to see how easy this is to do for yourselves. Open file. You can do it. 1 second. I say easy, but it's I probably have 8 million Excels open. 1 second here. Sorry, go ahead, Travis.
Well, no, I was just on a side note.
You have it up? No, it's not opening for me. Yeah.
On a side note, after our civil unrest video, I got my solar generator in, and my whole office is being ran off of solar power in the future, just not right now. But I already tested it, and it's really cool. I'm excited.
Okay, that's thank you for that filler. I appreciate it. Now I'm gonna share.
I'm proud of myself.
So this is No, I'm proud of you too. But this is why I don't often look at the internet while we're talking, because it messes at my feed, because I'm in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. Okay, so here you can see that this is the total households theoretically, and that number is larger than what you're going to find in the census. And that kind of the census data probably doesn't accurately reflect all the immigration that we've had. That you can go out to those immigration websites and get the data yourself. You can look at it, and we know though a lot of that is conflicting data, as well as probably underreported. But essentially what it says is household currently caught up on mortgage payments. Yes, no. And so 6,355,020 folks, represented in this survey are behind on house payments. Now, that is a much larger number than what you're going to see at Black Knight. Travis, go ahead, brother.
I didn't interrupt you though, but no, I didn't interrupt you. I was going to.
Your body language interrupted me.
Yes, because that says I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't have, but does that say 6.3 million people are currently behind on their mortgage, right?
Correct. Right
That
here.
pisses me off, man. I mean, these guys are
Yeah.
lying their butts off to us. Holy smokes.
And
That's way
this to
different.
me, yeah, this to me isn't even the most concerning. So as I'm going to open the other one and share my screen again, and this is on the rent. And they have this data by state, and which is so fantastic because I went into California, which had, when I was reviewing California, I'm like, why? They have such a low delinquency number for mortgage.
Mhm.
I had to start digging in. Well, you start digging in and you realize that actually California only has like a 44% home ownership rate.
Mm.
Whereas the country's average is around 65%. So you just have a lot more renters in California. And I bet you also have a lot more folks that own homes outright because they're investments. So if you want to share my screen again, Travis, this is the one that really, and I'll make it bigger for everybody here in my computer.
I saw it.
Yeah. So basically 71 million households that are renting. That's what this represents. And caught up on rent payments. 8.8 million people are behind on rent payments.
Wow.
So over 15 million people are delinquent on shelter. So the fact that, shelter is what's causing all of the noise and the CPI print, so this is crazy, guys, because this is a need. This is not, this is not a want. Now, we may all want a big house and we may all want a lot of things, but we all have to have shelter. And so this is how many American households, not even individuals, are struggling. So, and the fact is you don't hear about this. So, I think it's fascinating. This census survey never gets mentioned, but it has so many interesting questions in it. And I'm going to be diving into the food sufficiency soon, because I think that is crazy. I think, we're hearing it everywhere. We went to that San Antonio food bank, we're seeing that just traffic to those places increase. So just a ton of data out there if you want to look into how the consumer feels. And like I said, we've heard so much about how people aren't responding to surveys anymore, like the BLS survey, et cetera. This survey is increasing response. And I mean, I personally wouldn't answer these questions if I got the email. Because they ask things like, are you anxious? How many times have you been anxious in the last week? And it's really kind of sad how many people are anxious in the United States. So check this data source out. It's really, really rich with a lot of information.
Yeah, Melody, that was well done. So when I step back and I look at Black Knight, that's 3 to 4 times worse. That's almost quadruple more people in distress than what the top data provider is suggesting. And people in our industry, like realtors, bankers, financial advisors, people that are advising citizens, are using that data when the reality is it's like a tiny piece of the pie. How could financial advisors, mortgage professionals, realtors properly guide their clients if the own data that they're using is 1/4 of the reality of what if 4 times worse? I mean, I'm struggling with that data because I already thought like we found where the data was at, which was double as worse as Black Knight, which was an additional survey, but that shows only, like 10 million people. You found an additional data set that is 50% worse than what I could find myself. That's how 50% worse is millions of people. And so, I mean, it hits me in the face like, my God, man, it's like, it hurts my feelings because, again, I was raised a patriot. I was raised to trust my government. I was raised to like, it doesn't matter. These guys are crazy. I'm just going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep loving, whatever. I'm an American. And so it's like, it feels like they're manipulating us to make the economy of the housing market stronger than what it actually is. So we keep spending our money when the reality is we just need a government we can trust. And if we could live our lives based on a government we can trust, then we wouldn't even be in these problems to begin with. We can handle a recession together, unified as a society. But instead of us, going through this together as a society, it's like, nah, I got to make money off of it somehow. I got to make money off of it somehow. And there's like too many people trying to figure out ways how to make money off of things for anyone to stop and, hold their breath. And like, for example, Melody, why doesn't Black Knight go to that survey and say, wait a minute, if this survey says 15 million and we say 3 million, maybe we should pay attention to that. Why isn't Black Knight going to these data sets that have quadruple the amount of data?
Because all they care about is narrative.
It was rhetorical.
I know.
That's all I
That's
got
the
for
short answer.
That's Jack. Anything?
So look, guys, I'm sorry. I've been distant for the last couple of minutes. You may have seen my eyes twitching and me clicking back and forth because I've been pulling the thread on that super micro thing. So please don't take offense, Melody. You gave me a go-do. I went and did. It's interesting.
Can't wait.
You guys want to talk about this in a couple of
Yes,
minutes?
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay. We'll save
absolutely.
this for a few minutes.
Or we can talk about it now. Or Trav, unless
No,
okay. Okay, you finish up. Sorry.
Wait, me? It's my turn. See, y'all. Jack bullies me. When I turn this camera off, Jack is bullying me. He bullies me. Nothing, Jack. No comeback.
You guys know better. Okay, go ahead, Trav.
No, Jack is a sweet guy.
I can't think of anything witty. I'm sorry. I have AI fraud
in your mind
teasing me right now. So
yeah, no, Jack's a great guy. Again, I always say that's the thing I love about you most, Jack, is how great a father and a husband you are. Alrighty, whoops, that was the wrong angle there. I think I should add my screen to the stage. There we go. Okay, so we're going to go into the Boeing story now. Let me just do the timestamp as I've promised everyone. And yes, I have been keeping up with that, and it has been difficult. I almost messed up. All right, I got the timestamp. There will be chapters later. We're going to go into the Boeing factory. The machinist walking out, and then I have 2 questions to ask Melody and Jack. Individually, I have 1 question for Melody, 1 question for Jack. But again, I want to read this first. Boeing factory workers strike for the first time since 2008 after overwhelmingly rejecting a contract. And I'll read these 3 bullet points just in case you guys don't want to hear the whole story. More than 30,000, so this is 30,000 people, 30,000 families, members of the company, biggest unionized group, walked off of the job early on Friday. So they walked off Friday, and this was a 96% approval vote. So they wanted to walk off. 96% is huge. So they are appearing to be in unison, which is good. They're unified, which is one good thing about unions, whether you like unions or not. Thank God it's taking citizens and grouping them together, because that's exactly what we need more of in this country. The work stopped, halts, production on most of the company's aircraft, including the best-selling 737 MAX. The tentative proposal included a 25% wage over 4 years. So that's what they walked away from, guys. They wanted 40%. Boeing came back with 25%, which is roughly about 6% a year, not that much. Boeing's factory workers walked off the job after midnight on Friday, halting production on the company's best-selling aircrafts after staff overwhelmingly rejected a new labor contract because people are suffering. It's a costly development for the manufacturer, which has struggled to ramp up production and restore its reputation following safety crises. Notice this entire article is not saying anything about the whistleblowers that are no longer with us. I feel like it's interesting that these articles are leaving out that massive news where whistleblowers came forward and they passed away, multiple. They're not saying that in here. I wonder if they control the narrative. I wonder if Boeing owns part of CNBC. I don't know. I'm just wondering.
Hey, Boeing is so big and so important to the military industrial complex, and there's so much money moving around. Do you really need a tinfoil hat to imagine that they might kill over keeping some of this information secret? I don't think I need to put the hat on to imagine that possibility.
It depends if someone is awake or asleep when they're listening to you, Jack. But anyways, this goes on. Workers in the Seattle area and in Oregon, so this is impacting the U.S., okay, voted 94.6% against the tentative agreement that Boeing and the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers unveiled on Sunday. The workers voted, again, 96% in the favor. And this is a couple things here that was mentioned at a news conference. He characterized this as unfair labor practices. So this is the union, alleging that factory workers have experienced discriminatory conduct, coerced questioning, unlawful surveillance, and we had unlawful promises of benefits. So, I mean, it's just, this has nothing to do with the pay raise. Like, why didn't he come out and say, we just need to be paid more? We don't want to fight. You know what I mean? Like, it's because they have to fight that way. I hate it. Just come together, stop fighting for a second. He said Boeing needs to begin in good faith. Boeing didn't comment on this claim. Boeing's CEO, Brian West, told investors at a conference on Friday that the company's leaders were disappointed with the rejection and strike. But he said they want to go back to the table to negotiate a new deal that's good for our people, their families, and our communities. And our intent is to do just that. So that's Boeing saying they want to come back to the table. Of course they want to come back to the table because they're losing millions and probably billions of dollars. There was a disconnect, Wed said, at the Morgan Stanley event, warning that the strike would impact airline deliveries and production. Again, that will impact. He declined to provide specific financial impact estimates, saying the effect of the strike would be determined by obviously how long it is. So it can go long, it may not go long, but this is interesting. Credit rating agencies, and I believe this was done after the fact, Moody and Fitch warned Boeing that a lengthy strike put in danger of downward ratings, sending shares of the company to go down nearly 4% on Friday. I didn't follow back up with that. I wish I would have. Anyways, here it is again, you guys. The tentative proposal included a 25% wage increase over 4 years. So that's not 25 off the bat. The workers wanted a 40% increase. It does not specify whether they wanted that 40% increase over 4 years or not, but they didn't get 40%. They got 25% over 4 years. Okay. The vote is a blow, according to this article, to CEO Kelly Ortberg, who has been in the top job for 5 weeks. So I'm wondering, okay, well, you've been in the job for 5 weeks. Why would this has been going on for how long, right? This has been going on for years. You think you're going to make a difference? I mean, come on. If you want to make a difference, you got to give them more money. Simple as that. And honestly, it will probably impact jobs and there'll be job loss. But under the tentative agreement, Boeing had promised to build its next commercial jet in the Seattle area. So that would have been great for Seattle, apparently. A bid to win over workers after the company moved the 787 Dreamliner production to a non-union factory in South Carolina. The agreement, if approved, would have been the first fully negotiated contract for Boeing machinists in 16 years. Boeing workers went on strike in 2008 for nearly 2 months. Okay, and then the CEO, this is the last thing, the CEO of Boeing responded, okay, this is the best contract we've ever presented. So again, if their attitude is to negotiate with a bunch of people that they are better off, meaning the CEOs are in a better position than these workers, they probably have much nicer houses, they probably have much lower debt. If they're going to negotiate with people that are struggling as a result, probably the Federal Reserve, it's probably best not to be mean like that. It's probably best to be consistently humble and to stay at that table. You stay at that table until you come up with an agreement. Regardless, my question is going to start with, I think I'm going to start with Jack. All right, I'll start with Jack. I want to ask you, do you think that the strike had, do you think that the whistleblowers and the impact of, and their deaths had any impact on what's going on right now with these strikes? Did the death of the whistleblowers stir these people up in any capacity, do you think?
I don't know that the whistleblower story is directly contributing to this. I mean, the whistleblower, not to downplay the whistleblower story, right? When a guy takes his own life the morning he's supposed to give a deposition on a whistleblower case, that is highly, highly suspicious. All right. So I don't want to downplay that. But in this case, I think it just comes down to simple money. And I also think the union is being strategic here. They know Boeing is on the ropes. They know Boeing can't afford the strike right now. And so they're trying to capitalize on what they see as a vulnerable management team. And the management team is vulnerable here. Now, they may have overplayed their hand a little bit because a 25% raise is a tough sell to shareholders. The 40% raise is even tougher. And, Boeing can't really afford either. There was a data point in an article I just saw yesterday. A Wells Fargo analyst said, I think $1.37 billion per month this is going to cost Boeing in lost production. And Boeing only has $10 billion in cash left. And they're already scheduled to burn $3 billion in this current quarter, which means they can go about 5 months with this strike before the company is out of cash and has to raise capital. and they're on review for a downgrade because of this strike, which means they'd have to go to the junk bond market, which would be very expensive debt if they have to raise that capital. So Boeing's management cannot afford a prolonged strike here, but they haven't turned a profit since 2018, so they also can't afford a 40% raise. So the union is pushing the threshold here, and I'm not taking a side in the debate because, look, their cost of living has gone up 30, 40% in the last 4 years, and their wages haven't. So I don't blame them for wanting the raise. But if you bankrupt the company, then you're counterproductive. And I would also refer them to the UPS drivers, the airline pilots, the auto workers. There was a lot of big strikes and labor disputes last year that resulted in high double-digit wages. The railroad workers, right? They all got 25 to 40% raises. And then a few months later, the layoffs started, tens of thousands of layoffs. So if they're not careful, they're going to put themselves out of work here. That needs to be part of the calculus other than a bigger raise.
Jack, some people would say that Boeing bankrupted themselves and that had nothing to do with the actual employees. Others would agree with what you're saying. And that brings me to my next question to you, Melody. It actually sets it up perfectly. How do you think this ends? Where do you think that the fault lays? Do you think that the union overplayed their hand? Maybe it's their fault, and that aggressiveness will lead to more unemployment. Do you think it's Boeing's fault for bankrupting themselves potentially? Or do you think maybe it's the Fed's fault for the quantitative easing, flip-flopping roller coaster ride they've been giving us for the past, I don't know how many decades? Who's to blame here, Melody?
I think, like Jack said, this is a very complex system and company. It's a very large company. And that's difficult to say, but we know, like Jack was also saying, that they are heavily involved with our military industrial complex, right? And so, I think there are a lot of factors. I don't think it would be smart to say any one person thing is, sorry, 1 second.
It's okay. You muted. Okay. Well,
yeah, something's going on with my. Go ahead. You go ahead. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. Well, the thing is, let's just recap.
Trav, I do think, if I could, I do think to your point that Boeing did bankrupt themselves. All right. They quite obviously cut corners on safety. Some of these whistleblower reports about defective parts, in industries that are so heavily regulated, when parts go bad or are found defective, they have to be quarantined. They have to be labeled as defective, and they have to be preserved, and they have to be segregated from the population of usable parts. We used to do this in nuclear, and it's treated in a chain of custody way, almost like evidence from a crime is treated. Every person who touches that part and handles it has to log it, keep a record of it. So if it disappears, you know where it went. And these whistleblowers are saying these defective parts are being raided like a warehouse when they're short on parts and they need to make production. They're going and grabbing these things and installing them. And some of these defective parts are entire sections of fuselage, which are the size of a small house. These are not things that you just casually misplace. Oh, I know it's got to be around here somewhere. Is it under the table? It's the size of a freaking house. A lot of people need to be involved for these parts to escape quarantine and be actually installed in an aircraft. So this is not just a little, we let our standards slip a little bit. This is active, proactive bypassing of safety standards. People should go to jail over this if this is really happening, especially because people are dying on Boeing planes. Right? I mean, this technical issue with the anti-stall system is what started this whole mess. Boeing knew about that, but they said it'd be too expensive to train pilots on it, so they just didn't. And 350 people or so died in those two crashes. So this is a big deal. And you're right, Boeing, it's a self-inflicted wound. So I don't feel bad for the company, not even a little.
But sorry, Travis, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say people are dying off the plane as well when they blow the whistle on Boeing. But
what I was going to say is too, kind of like GM, who I used to work for. These huge companies have way too much. They get themselves into trouble, and then the government comes and bails them out, and one way or the other, be it with a actual taxpayer bailout or with a new contract, one way or the other. So your point about the Fed, your point about who is at fault. I mean, all of this is the fact that Boeing could do things like what Jack or we think, and we'll get the proof eventually probably, is just crazy to me. Like that we ourselves, like we have so much government intervention, yet what happened to our safety inspectors and things like that? I mean, anything you do these days, like please look at when you sign your life away, let's say if you're getting on a helicopter ride in Vegas or something like that, please ask them what the training is for their pilot. I mean, you hear all the time about these crazy incidents now because there just doesn't seem to be anyone auditing these places anymore and doing the quality checks. I mean, to what if what Jack just described is happening, that means, all of that government red tape is absolutely failing completely. And so like Jack says, it's a self-inflicted wound, but it's one they got to inflict on themselves because I think of their relationship with the government and loose monetary policy.
AKA corruption. Always
Hey,
corruption.
look, guys, if anybody else screws up on the job because of willful negligence and somebody dies, anybody else goes to jail for that. Anybody in any industry, a doctor, a driver for some truck company, right? If you screw up on the job because of negligence and somebody dies, you're going in a slammer. Boeing screwed up on the job and hundreds of people died. They cut a deal with the government that said they're going to double down on safety and fix this crap. And since they promised, cross your heart and hope to die, that they wouldn't do this anymore, we let them off the hook and nobody went to jail. And then it turns out things got even worse after that. And still the government penalties have been a petty slap on the wrist and nobody has gone to jail for this.
Sounds like the banking system.
Yeah, well, too big to fail. Boeing, let's face it,
like,
Boeing is
like
too big
we
to
were
fail.
talking, like we were talking about, the infection that you take a little bit of an antibiotic and then it comes because you didn't take the right one or really take the full course, it comes raging back. And that's what's happened in our financial system. And that's what it sounds like at Boeing as well. They saw they could get away with just a little bit and they just took full advantage of that.
Can I go? Let me go into share the comments and we'll end this sucker out here. I got one for you, Melody.
Oh, wait, yeah. But don't forget, Jack's got some spicy stuff. So,
oh my God.
Okay.
You know what, Jack? Let me pull that comment off there. At least they know what the next comment's
We'll
going to
do
be.
it real quick because I'm not sure it's very spicy. Some background on Supermicro Computer. All right, this is the Edgar website I have up here. So Supermicro Computer was the target of a short seller report by Hindenburg Research a few weeks ago. We did a whole special on that here on DNN. But real quick, I just want to send a shout out to my buddy, the Orca Fin. This is his Substack because that Hindenburg Research report was largely based on this work that the Orca Fin did on his Substack. He is at the Orca Fin on Twitter if you want to follow him. A really smart guy with an accounting background, and he did excellent work here. That's what took down SMC stock a few weeks ago. So Dario was saying that there's something going on where the Edgar website isn't working. That's the SEC's website for searching financial reports. And if you look here, this is Supermicro Computer's filings. It's kind of weird, like their current report from September 3rd. When you click on it, you get this message, forbidden, it doesn't work. It's a little suspicious. You scroll down, you look at some of the older filings here, going all the way back several months, even several years. None of these reports will work. It was kind of interesting because you go back as far as December of 2019 before you find one that works. And that was interesting because it was January of 2020 that Supermicro was relisted after their accounting scandal the last time they did accounting fraud. So all of these SEC filings since they got relisted stopped working. So it looked a little nefarious. Also in the context that yesterday was the deadline following the end of the 15-day grace period for SMCI to file their delayed 10K that they didn't file because of the short seller research report. And it looks like their auditor won't sign off on their filings. So that deadline came and went yesterday, and now none of these SEC filings work. But interestingly enough, if you go to SMCI's website, Supermicro here, and you click on the 8K, for example, the one from August, it works. You can actually bring it up. And if you look at some of their other SEC filings, like their current report from September, it works. So you can still get to the SEC filings through SMCI's website. And also pretty interesting, if you go back to the Edgar website and you put in some other company, like just hypothetically, let's put in Apple here, right? Ticker AAPL. and we submit that. Oh, come on. No matching companies. That's Apple's ticker. What the heck, man?
Yeah, you just use their name. Yeah.
Okay. I think this is an issue with the SEC website, because if we go to look for Apple's current report,
I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on, Jack. Sorry, but with what I know, that this very much could be that they are doing this. This is cascading because they don't want it to people to realize that this is what they were trying to do, and so I'm just going to put my tinfoil hat on, because you wouldn't just start an issue like that with SMCI only. It would have hit everybody at once, period. If that was
that's the point. It did hit everybody at once. You can't get the ones for Apple, for JPM.
No.
A couple of different companies.
What Dario was saying, though, in his tweet, was that that was cascading. It was when he had first started checking, it wasn't that way. Now, I can't say that for sure, but to me, it is still very suspicious. We only have Dario's word for it. And of course, those filings that you pulled up from their website, those don't typically link directly to Edgar. They're going to be things they uploaded themselves. So I'm sorry for anything to be forbidden on the Edgar website today. Unacceptable, period.
The other interesting thing, Melody, that I would throw in is things like statement of beneficial. Am I on mute?
No.
Okay.
I was just interrupting.
Statements of beneficial ownership, right? Those SEC filings, they still work. It's only the financial filings, the current reports, the quarterly reports. And the very curious thing, right? Let's take this 10Q from January of 2020. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
All right. That's interesting. But that's the cutoff, because if you go back a little bit further and you look at the current report from December of 2019, which it's not even showing.
Yeah.
Oh, well, now that one's not working. Okay. So that was working a few minutes ago. Now it's not.
That's what I mean. It's cascading, right?
So it is cascading. But a few minutes ago, the forbidden only came up to January of 2020. And that's when they were relisted on the NASDAQ coming out of their last accounting scandal. So that was kind of curious, but it looks like the fault is spreading. Let's just call this one inconclusive at this point.
I think that it's either a virus, it's a hit, it's either a cyber attack, or it's purposeful. Sorry. With what I know about technology, you can't just do that. So it's either a cascading cyber attack or it's on purpose. There's no in between.
And your tax dollars at work.
Exactly. Right. So, we shall see. But you can't do that. That just doesn't work that way. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Travis.
Oh no, I thought that was good. I thought you did great. I think you should.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. That was awesome.
So that's why I couldn't answer or ask any questions during your segment on the data, Melody. That's all the stuff I
don't care. Yeah.
I was wondering though, Jack. Isn't there a fine? Aren't they gonna have a penalty or something? There's a deadline, an extension deadline. I mean, can they just? Where's the fines and penalties here?
They're at risk of being delisted by the S&P here if they don't make this filing soon. And that's what happened to them in 2018. And if you look at what their stock did, their stock took a nosedive when that happened. So fines are their least of their problem. If they get delisted, there's going to be a lot of dumping of their stock, and rightly so. Honestly, this company is so sleazy. Charles Lang is a dirtbag, and his brothers are dirtbags, and they're stealing from their shareholders, and they're doing financial fraud. It's clear as day. Orcafin laid that bare, and they have a history of fraud, a very recent history of fraud. And everybody's sitting here saying it's so crazy to imagine these guys would be doing fraud. They did it just 6 years ago.
And rehired everybody, right?
Rehired the same guys.
Yeah.
That's insulting that they would just all the people we fired, they're back. A week after the guys in the SEC windbreakers left the building, we hired everybody back. Come on, guys.
Shane has a good point here. And Shane, thank you for the super chat and the support, the $10.
Thank you.
Boeing follow-up AS9100, do what you say what you do, basically. However, to be certed, you pay a third party to do the audit. So wait for a large contract with Boeing might sway severity of audit results. Melody, you want to knock that out?
Well, just like, PwC, like all those. I mean, my auditor sat right next to me, and I would try very hard not to explain my results to them because I wasn't supposed to, but that's what they expected. And it was crazy. Like they expected me to tell them what this FAS 159 schedule meant and to tie it out for them. And so, a lot of times the people they hire are young grads, don't know anything. But I agree. Like this is the problem with auditing in our country these days. Everybody's gotten way too cozy. And so and honestly, a lot of it, again, is it ignorance, ineptitude, or fraud? You never really know.
and it's interesting. They audit for the auditors now.
Yeah.
So they're auditing. So company can pay someone to do trickery and hey, audit my stuff. So because we're going to get audited and figure out how to manipulate this.
Oh yeah. We did that all the time at my company.
Well, yeah, you were in loans. I mean, so you see the original, anyway, we won't go there.
We would do mock audits. Like one of my companies I worked for would do CFPB mock audits for people, and I, at one company, got in a little too much trouble for giving their true results.
Yep.
Let's not put too much stock in these auditors too. Remember the big four auditing firms used to be the big five.
Mm-hmm.
And then Arthur
Anderson
bye-bye after Enron and WorldCom, right? And now we've got the biggest accounting fraud in history at Evergrande, which makes WorldCom and Enron look tiny by comparison. And PricewaterhouseCoopers just got slapped with the biggest fine for an auditor in the history of China this week because they signed off on Evergrande's books. So, the idea that like, a big four accounting firm couldn't possibly miss something. These big four accounting firms are company nameplates. They're networks of smaller companies that all operate under this much larger corporate umbrella. And as much as there are standards that people need to adhere to, you can never police everybody all the time. So, the idea that, because a big four accounting firm signed off, everything's good. The history begs to differ.
I got a good comment. Start with Melody. When I read this, I was like, wow, that's a good one. There's a reason. Okay. There was a reason nobody was taught what the Federal Reserve is in any school. I'll just say high school, right? Like college and lower. Any comments on that, Melody?
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, right? And I think the first time I ever my nephew made me watch a movie called, I can't remember the name of it now, but it was kind of like the Illuminati. It was kind of a big, alternative movie. And it was the first time I really had heard about the Fed's balance sheet and all of this. And, it sounded very tinfoil hatty at the time. And then I started getting curious and started reading. And then I read, Danielle's Fed Up and was like, holy cow. But no, they don't teach this stuff. And this is why, this is why we're on TikTok, right? Even though none of us really want to be. and we're going to be trying to promote that because if you look at our demographics, all of us, the three of us, we 18, that young demographic is not our audience. And more than any audience, that is who we have to reach because they do not have any of this information. They don't know, except for what they're getting on TikTok. And what's funny on TikTok, when I talk about the silent depression, actually that has gotten huge traction on TikTok, whereas on FinTwit, not so much. Sorry, I went to TikTok there, but.
Oh, that was good. That was good. Jack, what were you going to say? That was, by the way, just for the viewers, I turned 40 last year. I turned 40. And it wasn't until I was 40 that I realized what and who the Fed was. I literally, it's been less than a year. I was like, yeah, that's bad. But I still wanted a little faith in Jerome. It wasn't. I totally lost all 100% faith in the Fed, and it's been less than a year.
Yeah. And Melody, that's a great point about the younger generations who are paying the price right now the most for what the Fed has done. Nobody has suffered more than millennials and Gen Zers. And Trav, if you could you bring my screen up real quick, brother? If you want to understand what's going on, and if you ever have the ear of one of these guys, one of these younger folks, and they're complaining about never being able to afford a house or why their rent is so high, send them this chart, guys. This is mortgage-backed securities held by the Federal Reserve according to the St. Louis Fed website. $2.3 trillion worth of money that they have created out of thin air and pumped into the housing market to endlessly inflate prices. It started in 2008. That's why they can't afford a home. And at the current rate that they're winding down this money, it's going to take them 30 years to get to zero. If we want it, we could solve the housing crisis tomorrow. If the Federal Reserve was ordered by Congress to liquidate these mortgage-backed securities, home prices would instantly begin to correct and entire generations would be allowed to participate in the American dream again. But we won't do that because that will cost them money, the people who would have to vote in favor of it. So that's why you can't afford a house if you're young right now, because the Fed is propping up home prices by debasing your savings.
Okay.
And we will be putting that little rant on TikTok. Thank you very much.
Well, what about this, Jack? What about this? What do you think about this chart?
National debt, honestly, the Fed is the enabler. You can't have this chart without, okay, I got to bring up my other one then.
Well, you want to go chart battle? You want to have a chart battle right now? No, this is the chart you need to be looking at right here. That's the national debt. Look at this. This is national debt to GDP right there. Look at how parabolic that is. Your little mortgage-backed security chart, that's just a small piece of the pie. This is the piece of the pie you need to be watching right here.
Without a Federal Reserve monetizing this debt, this would not be possible. That chart would not be possible without the Federal Reserve monetizing it. And again, the Congress would be forced to reduce their spending if the Fed, like cowards, didn't cave every time there was a little bit of turmoil in the bond market. And look, the turmoil in the bond market is the world saying, hey, U.S. Congress, you have run out of money to borrow. You're spending more than you take in, and you're borrowing everything else. You've already borrowed everything. There's nothing left to borrow. And then the Fed says, oh, well, we made some more. You can borrow that. And that's why the other chart that I have up right now, if you want to go chart for chart, I can do this all day, baby. Come on.
Let's go, man.
Here's the Fed's assets. All right. This is their mortgage-backed securities and their U.S. treasuries, $7.1 trillion. All right. So about $4.5 trillion of this is U.S. Treasury bonds. So that chart that you just showed of the endless rise in government debt would not be possible if the Fed didn't monetize it. The Fed enables Congress and the Fed enables these runaway home prices. It all comes back to the Fed, baby.
Okay. Hold up.
But I agree. Congress is not innocent in this, but the Fed enables them.
Okay.
All right. You're up.
Okay.
Your charts.
Well, I mean, hey, here's the thing. Okay. I used two charts in my last one. All right. So this is,
and I have a question after this chart war is over.
No, sorry.
Okay,
no. You saved him. I'm going to let you save Jack. Jack, you've been saved. Go ahead, Melody.
Oh, okay.
I don't feel saved.
Well, you know, Jack, that Travis is not confrontational. You know that, right?
Thankfully, Travis is not confrontational. That's
okay.
Right.
All right. I've been staying out of this whole, inflation coming back debate because I just feel like there's going to be so much deflation. But based on that story about Boeing and thinking about the 70s, right? What do you guys think about whether you believe inflation is going to come back?
I don't think it ever left. And it's going to come back 100%. It's going to come back. But the question is it going to come back and elevate prices on everything? It's going to come back because they're going to do money printing. They're going to sell us on needing to bail out money to save the banks because it will help American families and we need to stop the job loss. And they're going to print the money, and that money is inflation. And so really the question is will the deflation be enough to absorb the incoming inflation? And that's I'm not 100% sure, right?
Jack?
Yeah, I think inflation I would say it's virtually guaranteed to come back. Now, when and what happens between now and then is debatable. And, there's legitimate arguments either way for that. I think right now we're on a course for deflation. Eventually, I think the government is spending all the money in the world once again. And sooner or later, the bond market is going to push back. They're going to say, government, you've already borrowed everything available. If you want to borrow any more, you're going to have to pay me a higher interest rate. And that when you get interest rates spiking like that, that's when we get these black swan events in the bond market. Those are very deflationary. You usually get housing crises and stock market crashes along with that kind of event. And then it's the response to that, which is always for the Fed to print money and loan it to the government. That's where the inflation comes from. So how bad will the Fed let it get before they start printing? Probably not very bad. I mean, they're already starting to blink. They already blinked in 2023 with the banking crisis. They blinked so many other times. So the underlying causes of the inflation, the lack of fiscal discipline and the central bankers enabling it, that has only gotten worse. And so I think it's guaranteed that inflation comes back, and it will come back worse.
Okay,
Well
thank you.
said.
No,
Well said.
I think so. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Also, just quickly, one thing I forgot to mention: the China story is one thing they're doing. They're relaxing capital requirements on the banks, which we got that story this week as well, right, Travis? That burned you up.
Well,
You
because
wanna
it's
comment?
well, it's stupid. The premise of like Basel III, the premise of them, you know what? I'm just gonna say, we just need to take our money out of the banks. The viewers, you don't do that. I don't want to cause a bank run, but think about what's happening here. They're taking our money and we're putting it in a depository account because we feel safe as Americans that we're going to put our money in the bank, and then that same money is used against us. They chop that money up and create more money. And so all of the more money that they're creating goes to buy stuff. And that, there's so much money buying stuff that those prices are elevated. And there's such a floor of inflation underneath that price going down. I mean, we're suffering right now. I mean, it's going to have to be a catastrophe. But really, what really needs to happen is not only just we need to stop the apathy. People need to care. But we need to really, when Jack said, it's so important, they need to allow us in recession. And they need to allow us to stay in recession. If they allow us to stay in recession, that's a good thing. And if we had politicians and leaders that would unify us during a recession and during a depression so that we can get back to normal, wouldn't that be a great thing? It doesn't have to be every dog out to get each other and a shark eat shark. I mean, we don't have to have the type of chaos and division that we have right here. It's just, I mean, we need more organization. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Can I talk to this a little bit? It did, Travis, and you hit it right on the head. I mean, you didn't get into the weeds of the Basel III and the numbers behind it, but fundamentally, everything you said is exactly what happened. Basel III was this set of standards that we passed after the great financial crisis when we said we're going to make our banks operate in a more safe manner. And to do that, we have these capital requirements, the amount of reserves we're requiring these banks to hold on to just in case there's a bank run, so they have money to give to people and they don't collapse. And the Fed has a problem. They allow the banks to bully them. They allow Congress to bully them. And the Basel III requirements were supposed to require a 19% increase in the reserves that those banks hold. And the banks came back and said, well, that would be too hard for us. It would hurt our earnings. And it might cause lending to dry up, and that would slow money creation, and maybe our fake economy wouldn't grow as fast. And so that would be too hard. You can't do that. They were children throwing tantrums. And the Fed came back and they said, okay, we're not going to make you do a 19% increase in capital requirements like Basel III requirements, like the international banking system agreed was in the best interest of everybody after the GFC. The Fed came out and said, instead of 19%, it's only going to be 9%. They cut it in half, more than in half. And so the banks basically bullied the Fed into going easy on them. And these are the rules that were put in place after the GFC to prevent more too big to fail. And,
Yeah, and go ahead.
Go ahead, Mel. I was done.
Well, no, and something everybody should know, and I should have put it in my Substack. I forgot, but they also relaxed the supplemental leverage ratio during the COVID housing boom, and that is why the banks participated. I mean, it was very clear to the banks, and I was at one of them, that we had to pull back on mortgages assets because of the way that they were risk weighted. And so what happened? Most of your mortgage lending went out to the non-banks. And that was a direct result of, the banks playing chicken around that SLR. So I have a feeling that, I don't know that 9% will happen. So, I think this is something I've been saying for a while. They're going to relax them all because they need the banks more than the banks need them, at least right now. Right. And so I think they're always constantly fighting one another in that relationship. And maybe the government at some point wins out. But, right now the banks are in control.
Yeah. I mean, but it's my money, though. Like, I don't want them to fight with my money. My taxpayer money. Yeah. I don't want my taxpayer money to go into the CEO's bonuses. When we looked at TARP and when we did a story, Melody, and I went down that TARP rabbit hole, we found out that these CEOs were getting billions of dollars as bonuses from the taxpayer. From the taxpayer. An
Yeah.
entire subdivision had paid a CEO's bonus. This is a wealth transfer, clearly. But I wanted to bring this comment up, and I know we're running a little bit late. If we can end in this comment, guys, I just thought this was real good, and each of us maybe could take a turn responding to this. I think it's great. We don't want to get too far ahead. We don't want to go too far back. We want to bring as many people with us as possible, but it's a very complicated task. It's taken me months to comprehend certain things. So I think, Jack, can maybe Jack start with right now, guys, these guys are speaking Greek to me. Can you just sum up what we're talking about maybe in a nutshell? Like if someone just came onto this channel, Jack, and they don't know anything about the Federal Reserve at all, right? They still think that when they go to sleep at night, the Federal Reserve is up like, all right, how do we help this household? And how are we going to make this easier to live for the household, right? They still may be thinking like that. What is as clear as possible? What message would you like to give to someone right now?
So, I mean, I understand it sounds like Greek eclair. And let me just tell you, this stuff is not that hard to understand. There's just a lot of terms that you don't know. So don't mistake that for like, oh, this is too difficult for me to understand. It's not. It's really simple. All right. It's just phrases you're not familiar with. The Federal Reserve is a cartel that controls the supply and thus the price of money. That's what the Federal Reserve does. Interest rates is the price of money. And so instead of a free market setting this price of money, interest rates, based on what the supply and demand for money is, we have the Federal Reserve who comes in every time the supply of money is not enough to meet the demand. The price of money, interest rates, starts to rise. And it's usually because the government is borrowing too much, increasing the demand for money. And there's literally not enough money in the whole freaking world to satisfy our government spending needs. And so the Federal Reserve comes in and says, no problem, we will increase the supply of money. And then that brings the price of money down, the interest rates, and it enables the government to borrow even more. And so what the Federal Reserve does is they enable this runaway spending in Congress. And it's that runaway spending in Congress and the Federal Reserve enabling it that has caused this inflation and this explosion in the wealth gap in the United States since the 1970s.
Well said. And I looked at that private chat. Melody, do you want to respond to this? And then Jack, I'll bring
2 seconds. What I would say is, guys, it is complicated to me. Like, it's not something we grow up learning. And so what I did, you just keep reading and reading and reading. And even if it's something, go Google, look up the term, but you don't even have to do that. Just keep reading. It will start to make sense. The more I read about these topics, the more I listen. I'm a huge fan of Eurodollar University. The early shows, they explain in great detail the back end of the monetary system. And again, the early shows, I wouldn't drop you in the middle of Eurodollar today, but go back to those early shows. They do so much great work. But go ahead to the next comment real quick there, Travis.
Well, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to M and J. Thank you for the support, hospitality, dirtbaggery alert. Jack, I know M and J is a member of your morning shows. Anything you want to say before you have to go? And I know Jack has to go.
I just want to say thank you, M&J, for helping us out in the chat as a moderator and for everything you do for the channel. And thank you for the super chat and for the dirtbaggery alert. That was in context of SMCI, I think. Definitely some dirtbaggery afoot going on over there. Thanks again, M&J.
All right. I think,
Melody,
should we wrap? Should we go ahead and wrap? Because Jack has to get out of here. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us yet again. Thank you, Isaiah. Unbelievably generous. And all of it matters, guys, because we really do work hard to bring this message to you. So thanks for joining. We'll see you again next week. And always remember, math matters.